It is close to mid-May 2024, and we've been over at the coast doing a few little things on our rental house, and we have it turned over to property management for the task of renting it out. So we decide that it's time for us to go over to Eastern Oregon and check on things. I hear it's been a really good year with a lot of moisture, so the flowers should be blooming great. We take the beach highway along toward Pacific City, and we come to the spot where the highway had washed out. They have put a traffic signal there, and so there's one-way traffic. Then past Cape Kiwanda, where the parking lot is completely taken apart. They've got it almost ready to pave, and so it'll be fixed in no time. We're soon crossing over the summit of the Cascade Mountains and see quite a bit of the lingering snow on top of the mountains. The ski resort on top Santiam Pass looks like it's getting a little short on snow. Mount Washington looks like it's got its share of snow up on top this volcanic peak. The white of the mountain shows up really good with a clear blue sky as a background as we move right over Santiam Pass. It looks like the snow is split a little for a snowslide. The sun is growing low in the sky as we reach the eastern part of the state of Oregon. The sun is sinking low in the sky when we reach the desert property where we'll be staying, and slowly the sun sinks down behind the Steens Mountains. The next morning, the sun comes up with a vengeance and another clear blue sky. Our trailer house is just fine here, and the Steens Mountains are standing tall and white in the background. But it's been a wet, really great year. Everything is super green here, and so we've got a bunch of weeds that we have to start pulling before they mature and become a fire hazard. We're going to go out and check the hot springs this morning. So we back out of our yard and head for the hot spring. It's just one of those fantastic, beautiful days as we move toward the hot springs. We stop a minute to look at some of the flowers. They are the evening primrose. That's one of Marge's favorite flowers, and they're just growing everywhere this year and blooming really great. This is the Oregon Desert, but it's green as could be this year. We travel along an old fence, and there's a flicker that keeps doing what we'd call musical fence posts. Every time we get close to him, he'll fly on down a few posts, then stop and act like he's feeding on the post. The birds are pretty much nesting now, so they'll do that sort of thing just to draw you away from where they're nesting.
There he went down on the next post.
Yeah.
While he's there, he figures he just will get a bug or two off the post.
Then he went down to another post. He says this is making him nervous. Yes.
There are crickets here, just running all over the place. I'm trying to see what they are. It could be their juvenile Mormon crickets that have just hatched out, but there's a jillion of them here. They look to be Mormon crickets, but they're way small. We've reached Willow Creek Hot Springs, so we're going to go down and try the water, see how it is today. How's the water?
It's nice and hot.
Nice and hot, huh?
Uh-huh.
Looks real nice. That's the hot pool, and the other side is the cooler pool.
The water from this hot springs comes right up through the bottom, and we can see the volcanic gases that are coming up with the water jiggle their way to the surface, and the pool is nice and warm, just an absolute perfect temperature.
Some little floats of algae in the hot pool, and little bubbles of volcanic gas percolating up from way down deep.
It's about the first really nice warm day of the season, so everything is coming out. The Great Basin gopher snakes have left the warm protection of their den and were all over the place. And then we found the Mormon crickets, just hordes of them moving across the road. Some of them are quite small, so they must have hatched out real recently. A wave of crickets like this will eat everything green in sight and totally destroy the grass crop. But I guess they just have to run their cycle. This is all part of the natural way of things. Some years you have them, and other years you don't. But there's sure an abundance of them this year, and we'd see them in big waves crossing the road.
Duct tape would have worked.
Anything that likes to eat crickets surely won't go hungry out here. The birds just gorge themselves on it. And I suppose coyotes and everything eat these guys. Usually the grasshoppers and crickets are associated with a dry year. During the Depression, I hear the old-timers tell about the dry year. The grasshoppers came and ate all their wheat, cut it right off the ground, and then the wind blew it in the cracks in the ground, so they got nothing. And then the grasshoppers moved to the house and would sneak in the house and even eat the curtains in the house. They might be pretty tasty if you boil them in salt water, but it doesn't sound good to me. Then we move on and we find the little flower the tidy tip, just groups of them blooming, and then the larkspur, this poisonous larkspur plant, sticking its single spike of flowers skyward. The crickets aren't just everywhere. They haven't made it here yet. I don't know what they'll do when they come to the larkspur, but the Steens Mountains is sure looking nice with a pretty coat of white snow on it as we head back to where we'll be staying tonight. And that old Flicker, he's moving along doing his musical fence posts as we move in to our desert property. I hope Flickers are fans of Mormon cricket flesh. If so, he should be fat and sassy, and he doesn't look like he's missed too many meals, so maybe he's been eating a bunch of them. Along the edge of the desert property, we find the evening primroses gently waving in a gentle desert breeze. They're a very pretty early spring flower, and we don't see them every year, only the damper years seem to bring them up. But they're a very popular houseplant, even a primrose, but these are the evening primrose. They're a bit different, and you can order the seeds for them through Amazon, and there's several different types. Then we see the death camas sticking its single spike of poisonous flowers out of the sands of the desert. Next, we'll go out to Coyote Lake and check and see if it's dry. This had one time been a really deep lake without a drain, so all the water from the surrounding hills ended up here, and without a drain, it just settled out and eventually filled this up. But it was a deep lake with big Lahontan cutthroat in it. A whole long time ago. There's a few of the cotton candy clouds floating in a clear blue sky as we travel around Coyote Lake. It's really smooth and nice to drive on. Some years this lake has a few rocks on it, and they freeze in the ice, and then the wind blows the ice when it starts to melt, and these rocks are hanging down, and they make these scrape marks just like at the racetrack in Death Valley. They were at first misunderstood, and it took a long time till people finally figured out how those rocks moved and why they made these scrape marks. This playa has small cracks in it that hum when you drive across it, but it's a really fun place to be, and you have an excellent view of the Steens Mountains and the surrounding hills from here. It's really a fantastic place. The Sheepshead Mountains show up in the background, and then directly to the west, the Steens Mountains are standing tall and snowy against a clear blue sky by now. Sometimes even clumps of horse manure will freeze in the ice and leave big drag marks. But this year, if it happened, there was some moisture came later that erased all the evidence of it. We do see a rock or two here on the playa that has probably been frozen in the ice and moved. But anyway, the drag marks are gone, probably due to late moisture. So that's all right. Maybe we didn't get to see any this year, but we'll do it again another year. Property and work on pulling some weeds. Then we look out just outside our fence Here's a sight we've been wanting to see. It's Old Blaze, and they did a big horse capture, and I thought we'd never see Old Blaze again, and he's looking nice and fat this year. He's quite old, and we've seen him out here for quite a few years. He was at one time a proud herd stallion, but he may be too old to cut the mustard anymore. I understood they captured and took about 100 head of horses out here just a few years ago when it was really dry and there wasn't much feed and there was danger of these horses starving to death, and they were all very skinny. But it looks like Old Blaze made it with flying colors, so it was really good to see him again, and he's just as feisty as ever. I know when the BLM captures these horses, they always miss some, and sometimes they deliberately leave a few just to continue on the legacy of wild horses in the desert. And so we see Old Blaze, and this must mean that there's more horses here yet. And Old Blaze almost acts like he recognizes it. He came up within 150 yards of us and just kept running back and forth with the Steens Mountains in the background. Since he's here, there must be more horses here, so we'll just keep our eyes open and watch and hope we see some more. These are definitely rugged survivors of the desert, and they've never had a bite of grain nor a bale of hay. They just do with what they have, but they survive and even thrive out here. But this is a lower elevation here, so there's not much snow happens here. A little bit sometimes, but not much. And there's plenty of feed this year, but other years it might be pretty skimpy. He's looking back over his shoulders. Maybe he sees another horse out there. We're going to watch carefully and see who survives the capture and the elements out here. And since Old Blaze did, probably there's some more. He's still peeking around looking, and he just doesn't seem to want to leave. He goes back and forth in front of our fence, just like he actually recognizes us, and he's really glad to see us. He moves in a little closer to the fence all the time, but he's going to run out of nerve and take off across the desert here real soon. And so we're really watching to see who else might have survived. I'm hoping there's some mares here, so it'll carry on another generation of these feral horses. He's quite old and probably has some teeth that need to be straightened out in him, but it looks like he's able to eat quite well and is doing very good. Of course, it is an extremely good year out here for him. He's using a lot of energy there, but he seems to have good energy this year, and I don't know why he's circling around there. I just almost think that he recognizes us. We've taken pictures of him and even have some on the wall. That is a few years ago, before the big capture, so I thought that would be all we'd ever see of Old Blaze, but I was fortunately very wrong on that part. He's a very good survivor, and made it through. Marge was wondering what happened to her precious little antelope ground squirrels, and I guess nothing did, 'cause they're here in style, begging for peanuts. These antelope ground squirrel are a solitary animal, but a few of them will come, not too many, when they realize there might be a free peanut here, and that sounds so good to them. Whenever they move real rapidly across the open, and if they want to rest, they go in the shade of a bush where the other animals won't see them. And they're an animal that's a desert animal, and they never have to drink a drink of water in their entire life. They have the mechanism to make it, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't take a drink if you give them one, because they sure would. We were concentrating on watching the ground squirrels, then we heard the thunder of hooves, and here's another old retired stallion that we knew before several years ago before the capture, and this is the first time we've seen him since, and it's Old Spot and his sidekicks. We have some pictures of them hanging on the wall before the capture, and they're all what you would call satellite stallions. They have become too old to fight the younger stallions in the herd, and so they stay on the outside of the herd and graze away on the desert, and they're looking really good too. So is Old Spot. Spot must be a rather social fella, 'cause he's always got buddies with him. They've all survived the drought and the nasty winters, and now they're rewarded by an excellent year with lots of nice tender grass and blue skies and sunshine to graze under. So they're doing just fine. It's sure good to see that Old Spot is still doing well, and he'll be here to carry on the legacy of wild horses on the desert. There are literally hundreds of square miles of desert out here, so they're scattered out on it, and you don't get to see them every day. But today they came by, I guess maybe just to say hi. As the afternoon wears on, it looks like a little squall brewing up in the Staines Mountains. And I'm starting to catch a nasty cold, which it's been years since I've had one, so I'm having a little trouble even narrating this. But wow, look at the evening primroses blooming all over the place. The ground squirrels eat some of the outer leaves off these, and then after they bloom, they love the seeds. So Marge and I are going to get in the vehicle and go back over and test the water in the hot springs. It looks like a very nice day, and wow, are the Mormon crickets out in force. Anything that likes to eat crickets ought to be fat and sassy this year. Just waves of the hoppy little things jumping across the road. You'd have a wave of them, and then you'd go another half mile, and another wave of them would cross the road. And I got out and walked, and they're just hopping and jumping ahead of me, trying to keep out of my way. These crickets have a ferocious appetite, and so they're going to eat everything in sight. This is the first year since we've had this property that we've seen Mormon crickets here, and boy, are they thick. When I was growing up in Montana, toward my teenage years, they had a spray, and they'd spray them with airplanes, but I understand that spray's been banned now, but I'll bet you they have a bunch more different types of spray to get these, otherwise they'll just completely wipe out a crop. My dad built a device that they would pull along behind a team of heavy horses. The crickets and grasshoppers would jump up in it, and then there was a screen in the back that would give them light, and they'd think they could jump through, but then they found they couldn't. So they'd get gunny sacks of these and take them to the creek and throw them in the creek and drown them, and then feed them to chickens and hogs or anything that would eat. We go to the swamps around Willow Creek Hot Springs and see there's a good amount of water and the cattails are coming.